Hey there, and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete, and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Anomaly Sea Ice Challenge with the transhumanist Paragons of Pandroth. Last time we left off after being joined by the blind Kojiro, who possesses unnatural healing abilities. We also had a Warped Obelisk crash on the sea ice, and Naseem was abducted by it and transported into the Labyrinth. And as you can see, that labyrinth is a vast place, and making our way through it will be slow. One by one, Naseem will have to open all of these jammed doors. Somewhere in here there is an exit, but we have no idea where. However, we've got 2 floor etchings in the room that Naseem started in, so perhaps they can reveal a bit more information. This first one, however, sadly only consists of incoherent ramblings. Number 2, meanwhile, is a bit more conclusive, albeit barely. It tells us that the exit is somewhere east of here, which, well, considering where we started, is a pretty safe bet. Still, no choice but to press onwards. For a change, we've got a door here that can simply be opened and does not need to be forced open. Unfortunately, though, what lies behind it is more disappointment. Eventually, then, we find something, a sleeping flesh beast. Just a harmless finger spike, probably no match for Naseem. Still, let's try not to wake it up just yet. An early injury could make this trip a whole lot more tedious. In the next room then, a grey box is waiting to be opened. Inside, Naseem finds one of these anomaly books. This one granting study progress towards the Revenant Invisibility project, but it also comes with an hourly 4% mental break chance. Making his way over to the next door then wakes up the finger spike. Thanks to a legendary quality nerve spiker though, the fight here should be short-lived. As we briefly check in with our 2 Psycasters, Light and Elpis, then we get the message that prisoner Carlos has gone berserk. This blood rot patient is part of a quest that we accepted last episode. In exchange for some medicine from the Empire, we need to keep him alive for 16 days. Let's hope that our ghouls have received that message too. Naseem, meanwhile, has found some very precious food in the next room. Considering that, unless we get lucky with finding the exit soon, he will probably spend a bit more time down here, I think it's safe to say that that will come in handy. Our prisoner, meanwhile, has been beaten into submission. Once more, the ghoul police has done its job. Dr. Nightshade will take care of the rest, while Elpis begins a long overdue death rest, leaving Light to fend and meditate for himself for the next 4 days. In the Labyrinth, meanwhile, Naseem has stumbled upon a handful of dead bodies. Not exactly a calming sight, but then again also no immediate threat. A bit more exploration then reveals more food in the next room, but nothing special apart from that. And as you can see, we are close to reaching the eastern edge of the map, and so far no exit in sight. In the lower right corner here then, Naseem finds a grey statue. And how about we approach it to find out what it does? Alright, Naseem gets teleported, unfortunately though into a room that we already visited. However, it would have also been possible to be transported somewhere that we've not yet explored. In this case though, the statue not really of much help. After a more than necessary meal, Naseem then opens the chest in the next room here, only to find a skull. Again, not exactly the kind of treasure you're hoping to find. After a brief nap then, exploration continues, although so far without any promising results. Most of the rooms we find in the labyrinth here are just empty, which I guess is somewhat the point of a labyrinth. For Naseem, however, it surely must be a daunting experience. The next door here then, still not revealing much. Eventually though, Naseem comes across another dead body and a sleeping flesh beast. And we're using the fact that it is sleeping to strike on our terms. Unfortunately though, the shot does not land, but thanks to his flesh whip, Naseem still makes quick work of the attacker. While he keeps exploring, we then use Nightshade's Transmute Steel ability again. I admit I kind of forgot that we had access to that, probably also because, just like in this case, she usually ends up turning steel into bioferrite, and we already have plenty of that. Shortly after then, the pit gate rumbles, an event that we are unfortunately already somewhat familiar with. Please ignore Liftabot Starburst here. I wanted to send it down into the pit gate and then put Vulik into death rest, so for now the mech is stuck here. That probably does not bode well for it, but thanks to the captured Nochiosphere, we have some hopes of making this fight a little easier. The 90 seconds of Onslaught mode will probably not be enough to take care of the entire horde of flesh beasts, but it hopefully breaks up some of the bulb freaks into smaller, more manageable entities. What I don't really like here is the fact that the Nochiosphere keeps teleporting towards our base. I would have preferred for the flesh beasts to keep their distance for a little while longer, but I suppose we shouldn't complain about the assistance. Still, as you can see, it serves its purpose. The group has been split up into lots of smaller flesh beasts, and while that definitely increases enemy numbers overall, the finger spikes in particular are very easy to take down. The Nochiosphere then vanishes, leaving us to deal with the rest of the enemies by ourselves, and those are quickly lured into a nice little choke point. Now, there are still a few bulb freaks and tri-spikes among them, so I fully expect there to be some enemies attacking us from the back, but overall this strikes me as a reasonable challenge. Of course, our three ghouls, Midnight, Jay and Kelly, are taking quite the beating, but then again that's kind of their job, and as you can see, with this defensive setup, the bulk of the enemy force is quickly dispatched off. The last bulb freak and the resulting tri-spikes are giving us a little bit of trouble, but as you can see, Maniac is doing his best to keep the threat away from our shooters, and a Persona Monosword is probably a sufficiently powerful tool for that job. Eventually then, everything is defeated, at least near our base entrance. Plenty more are still roaming around near the pit gate, either as a result of downed flesh beast splitting, or after recovering from the Nochiosphere's agony pulse. A handful of those are also attacking us pretty much right away, and once again the splitting tri-spikes are a bit of a problem. The majority of the flesh beasts still out there, however, just keeps roaming the sea ice, so it looks like we'll have to take the fight to them. And so we do. A small detachment of not exactly healthy pawns is sent out to attract the enemy's attention, and their numerous injuries are also the reason why we are opting for the early retreat here. Some of these folks are definitely no longer able to outrun a flesh beast, and there is still a considerable force out there, so we don't want to get ourselves surrounded. An untimely, but I guess not exactly surprising mental break for Nightshade then does not make things any easier, and so with no additional flesh beasts heading for the base at the moment, we're calling for a ceasefire, a bit of time to rest and recover. Shortly after then, we receive an interesting quest. A hostile shuttle carrying a Sanguiphage and his thralls is having trouble, and we could lure it over to us to force it to crash near our base. If we do, its occupants will remain hostile to us, but potentially capturing a Sanguiphage might be of some use, not to mention that there are 5 other people on board who might have interesting skills or traits as well. For the moment, however, we quickly jump back to Naseem, who has finally found something. A chest containing 3 metal blood serums, however, still no exit. The shuttle quest we then accept. Considering the number of flesh beasts on the map, this could lead to another fight that we do not need to get ourselves involved in, and indeed, with the shuttle crashing not too far away from the group of enemies, we can now sit back and watch the two sides take care of each other. Of course, I fully expect the flesh beasts to win this, simply by sheer numbers, but if they keep attacking just 3 or 4 at a time, they might suffer some decent casualties. The entire affair is then lit up by a beautiful aurora, but the tide of this battle is definitely turning, and it is in part also due to friendly fire. Naseem's journey through the Labyrinth then finally leads him to another Warped Obelisk, and I think it's pretty clear already that this will be our way out of here. Took us quite a while to find it, even though it wasn't actually too far away from the entrance, and the pop-up here also once again pretty much confirms it. We should be able to use this to send Naseem back home. Back home, meanwhile, the Sanguiphage and his allies have a little surprise for us in store. They're sending in reinforcements with drop pods, perhaps thankfully right into the room where our ghouls hang out, buying us enough time to keep them busy until the cavalry arrives. Once we have all enemies tangled up in melee combat, the fight is over quickly, Our ghouls, as well as Maniac and Scyther Gnome, are making quick work of the attackers, and shortly after, all members of the Sanguophage party are fleeing, although they don't exactly get far. In the Labyrinth, meanwhile, Naseem has looted 7 Mind-Numb Serums and a Biomutation Lance. The latter we gladly exchange for his Smoke Pop pack, those you can frequently find on enemies. Now, while we could make him leave the Labyrinth at this point, we're not going to. There is, after all, quite a bit more of it still left to explore, and he might find a few more valuables along the way. The next door then reveals another one of these grey statues, this one, however, surrounded by 2 dead bodies, so perhaps we just leave that be for now. Our eagerness to fully explore all of the pit gate is then also swiftly punished. Naseem suffers a mental break and now runs around hallucinating, as if the Labyrinth experience wasn't bad enough. On the bright side, that gives us a bit of time to hunt down the remaining flesh beasts. After the Sanguophage's attack, we don't really have that many still left, but we should clear them out, simply so that we can continue deep drilling and that our mechs can continue roaming the sea ice to haul stuff. Thankfully, it doesn't take long until the last few are dispatched off, and just in that moment Naseem's mental break also comes to an end, so he can keep exploring and we can take note of the fact that the Sanguophage himself actually survived. No surprise, after all, he is deathless, so we're now capturing him while Naseem detects more dead bodies. Due to his deathless gene, our prisoner has gone into forced death rest, so he won't wake up for another 3 or so days. He is also only 14 years young and equipped with a bionic leg, so potentially a recruitment candidate. Let me know what you think about that. Admittedly though, skills-wise he does not really fill any need, not to mention that he very much attacked us, and that maintaining a Sanguophage's need for death rest and particularly hemogen can be a bit tricky with multiple of them in the colony. Still, let me know what you think, as Lauren replaces the unfortunately destroyed deep drill and Naseem opens another door, this one revealing a small assortment of trees for some reason, because, and you may not have known this, the Labyrinth is actually considered to be an outdoor space, and actually, with a steady temperature of 25 degrees Celsius, you could, in theory, even grow crops in here, and I have seen people talk about a playthrough where they exclusively live in the Labyrinth, although I imagine that could get rather repetitive after a while. Either way, we have now unlocked high mech tech, and with that a wide assortment of new mechanoid technology. To get to ultra mech tech, we need to acquire a nanostructuring chip, which we will be able to loot from the next level of mechanoids we can now call in. I think we'll get into that a bit more in the next episode. For now, let us quickly pump out advanced lights, not only because this allows us to have differently colored lights in our base, but also because it actually cuts the power consumption of all lights in half. In the Labyrinth, meanwhile, Naseem is currently opening the last locked door, and with that not revealing anything of interest either, let us now interact with that statue and the 2 dead bodies right next to it. This here is why we did not get close to it earlier. It will now awaken these 2 as shamblers, and because we don't really need to mess with those, I would now say that our journey to the Labyrinth has come to an end. After more than 3 days in this maze, let us now finally send Naseem back home. Back home, our blood-rot prisoner has also gone berserk once more, time for the ghoul police to take care of that, while Naseem activates the obelisk and leaves the Labyrinth behind. In doing so, a few of the things and creatures from the Labyrinth are now being transported back onto the sea ice with him, including one of the shamblers he has just awoken, but that should not be too much of a problem. Shortly after dealing the final blow, both to the shambler and to our prisoner, we are then informed that after returning Naseem, the obelisk has now vanished, so there won't be any return to the Labyrinth, unless of course a second one happens to appear. While Naseem then goes on a go-juice binge to work through the events he just had to endure, Volek's Coagulate makes sure that our prisoner does not die. Thanks to numerous berserk mental breaks, he has taken his fair share of beatings, resulting, among other things, in a shattered jaw, 2 torn-out eyes, and a bitten-off leg. And speaking of torn-out eyes, Slave Shireen is currently finishing the second of 2 bionic eyes, about to be installed onto our currently still blind healer Kojiro. However, that plan is swiftly interrupted, not only by a medium-intensity psychic drone, but also by the appearance of some Sightstealers, or at least for the moment just a single one, currently attacking the mechanoids protecting the defoliator ship that landed last episode, and we hear some shrieking in the distance, so more of them will be coming. So, probably best if Light and Elpis just stay inside for now. Meanwhile, Nightshade can go to work on Kojiro, replacing first the right eye and then the left. To check whether or not we've got any more Sightstealers present, Light also briefly ventures over to the mechanoids. On the left side here you can also see it, the psychic drone affecting him for a minus 88 mood penalty. In hindsight, it probably would have been best to send him death resting 2 now, even though he just finished one. On the sea ice, meanwhile, we unlock the Advanced Lights project. It was a quick one to complete, and I think let's continue with marine armor. That one will be a tad bit more lengthy, but eventually it is something that we want to have available to us. The new colored lights then immediately setting the mood in our gene lab and death resting chamber, and then it happens, Light suffers a mental break. Now suffering from terrifying hallucinations, he runs around aimlessly, while Elpis has also woken up from his death rest, or pretty poor timing. Let's hope that whatever Sightstealers are coming take their time. Being able to see again, Kojiro then mysteriously heals Zamal's brain scar, while another one of our prisoners is not quite so well off. Yes, he is now able to walk again, but the poor guy has been absolutely crippled. At this point, we can also take a brief look into the pit gate, where Lifterbot Cruxel has transported all of the steel to the surface, and so we are now sending down a small team to clear out the rest of the cave. That quickly reveals the Dreadmelt that we had already roughly located, and well, the plan is in fact to now take it down. After all, the Nocchiosphere won't stick around forever, and the flesh beasts that are sporadically released from the pit gate are one of the larger threats to our colony at the moment, even if the pit gate itself serves as a fantastic place to dump our toxic waste. By killing the Dreadmelt, a 10-hour timer then activates. We have done this once before, so I don't think it needs too much explanation. What we do discover after all flesh beasts have been defeated, however, not only some insects, but also another steel vein, which Maniac, of course, promptly begins to mine out, even with the fight still going on. For our 2 Psycasters then, the situation goes from bad to worse. Elpis is now also hallucinating, while the pit gate is about to be fully cleared. This flash sack right here, the last bit of interesting loot inside of it, and it only contains a corpse. So with only 6 hours remaining now until the pit gate collapses, we spend the rest of that time hauling the steel back to the surface. Eventually then, with stone blocks already raining down on us and only a few minutes left, everyone makes their escape, and only a few short moments later the pit gate collapses. So no more easy toxic waste disposal for the time being, but we also don't really get a chance to worry about that, as Randy picks this exact moment to send the remaining Sightstealers, and yes, both Elpis and Light are still in their mental breaks. Now, Light at least conveniently snaps out of it just as the Sightstealers attack Elpis, and once again the situation turns from bad to worse as the Sightstealers are joined by a group of Shamblers, luckily entering the map pretty far away from us, but this could of course result in the few Scythers quickly getting decimated, and I am currently still counting on those to help us out here. Instead, it looks like we'll have to force Elpis out of danger through liberal use of the Skip Psycast. Thankfully, Sightstealers do have an increased psychic sensitivity, so Berserk Pulse should work well on them. However, the effectiveness of this approach will obviously largely depend on how many of them there are, as Light only has so many Berserk Pulses in him, and will need to conserve Psi Focus for a few emergency skips. His neural heat limit then already exceeded with this Berserk Pulse right here, and as you can see, we still have plenty of Sightstealers left. However, at least for the moment, it looks like our 2 Psycasters will manage to get away. The Scythers are also doing a great job holding their position, and so logically our plan here involves luring the remaining Sightstealers over to them. This is of course made a tad bit more difficult by Sightstealers going invisible if they're not directly near you, but as you can see, it does appear to work, even if Light has to suffer through a few more injuries in the process. One small benefit, if you will, of Elpis's hallucination mental break, by the way, is that he actually actively runs away from light at the moment, which we can use to kind of guide him away from our enemies too. It is obviously not an exact science, but it does work well enough, and it allows our two Psycasters to safely get away from the action while the Scythers take care of the Sightstealers. Or at least of most of them, as Light is getting ambushed here once more. This here seems to be an already injured Sightstealer who seems to have recovered, and so while Light catches another hit or two, he does manage to get away, and the Sightstealer also collapses shortly afterwards. The only problem is that despite being deathless, Light is now so heavily injured that he too collapses, his blood loss just too extreme, and Elpis is sadly still hallucinating. And I think we'll end it there. How about a nice little bit of trouble to wrap up the episode? I don't think we need to ask the question of whether or not Light is going to survive this just yet. After all, both him and Elpis are sanguophages, but this incident surely could have interesting implications for their whole teacher-student dynamic. So as we now take note of the slightly worrying fact that the Shamblers have made quick work of the Scythers, let's make the cut at this point. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!